So today we are delighted to welcome Dr. Christopher Haas. Originally from Canada, Dr. Haas received their BSc in physics from the University of Calgary and a PhD in physics from Kansas State University. They joined Rutgers in 2024 as a postdoctoral associate in the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology at the School of Arts and Sciences at Rutgers-New Brunswick. Dr. Haas is an expert in the field of STEM education research. Their primary interests are in how faculty make decisions about their teaching methods and how they set goals for course development. So here at Rutgers, Dr. Haas has been working with the Teaching Excellence Network to study barriers that some faculty sometimes face in their teaching. And at this time, I would like to hand it off to Dr. Haas, who knows far more about this topic than I do, and they will be sharing a bit more about their research in this area.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. Hello, everybody. I can't force you to do this, of course, but I will gently encourage you to turn your cameras on, share your beautiful faces with us. Makes things so much more lively. This talk is looking like it's going to be kind of cozy sized. We've got somewhere between a dozen and 20 people rather than, say, 60 to 100 people, which is fantastic. As Carl said, I'm Canadian, and I am struggling with bit. Yes, good. We're struggling. We went too far. I'm Canadian, and the structure of this talk is, broadly intros, theory, data, and then we're going to replace the implications section with a section on teaching resources at Rutgers. And the reasoning behind this is that, as Carl said, what I research is how do we teach, how do we learn, and how do we support faculty and instructors in teaching? So really, our implications section should be talking about how we help you teach, which is what we're going to do. I am from Canada. It turns out Canada is close by, and also this continent's really big. I'm from Calgary. You can see that circled on the left side of the screen. We are in New Brunswick, circled on the right side of the screen, roughly. Whoops, one click too far. And that's about the same distance time-wise as some of our European colleagues are from home. Wow, big continent. Way too big, perhaps. This is more about me. Turns out that I am a physicist. In spite of the fact that my focus is STEM education research, my background is in physics. I teach physics. I love physics. I also love a wide variety of tabletop and computer games. And my research interests, to expand upon Carl's awesome introduction, include cognition, communities and collaboration, and education, which is what I focus on here. How do we teach? How do we learn? And how do humans develop new skills? Before I get into the meat of the talk, I would like to acknowledge the people I work with here. It turns out that the co-PIs on my grant are Mary Meneke, Chaz Ruggieri, Phil Brown, Stacy Blackwell, and Corey Patak, who Corey is at Columbia these days, but used to be at Rutgers. And then I'll acknowledge Tracy Addy, who I think is in the audience today. Hello, Tracy. Tracy is the director for the Institute for Teaching, Innovation, and Inclusive Pedagogy, which I always struggle to say. And she helped us with this talk and is helping us think about institutionalizing the 10 program, which we will talk about in this talk. Speaking of the 10 program, what is the 10 program? This is the program I do research on. It's Rutgers Teaching Excellence Network. We've had 75 participants over 4 years, and this program is now being passed off to Tracy and the Office of Teaching Innovation and Inclusive Pedagogy. We call it TIP. The 10 program has in the past had a couple of major components, and the reason I introduced them to you here is for context on research later in the talk. So we had the Summer Institute. This is an intense 2-week workshop. Faculty show up and we help them develop particular elements of a specific course that they have decided they want to work on, right? This is very intensive. It's a lot of work, but when they leave this workshop, they have developed new syllabi, new activities, new teaching methods, learned new pedagogy, so that when they go into the semester, they're ready to go. The other part of the 10 program has been these semester support groups, and these are ongoing faculty community groups hosted primarily online. that meet over the entire semester, intermittently once every week or 2 weeks, to discuss specific topics about teaching and course transformation. The 10 program also had a leadership summit, coordinating council, and the goal of these was to bring together a lot of stakeholders here on campus and figure out how we could do a better job of centralizing teaching resources and support for faculty. And it turns out that TIP has become the central hub, or is becoming the central hub for this stuff. So what is happening as we go on the talk? First, we've got the intro. We're most of the way through that. Then we will get into theory. This is a research project, and it turns out good research is grounded in theory. So naturally, we have theories to tell you about. Then we'll get into interviews as data. It turns out that I do qualitative research mostly. I'm really interested in humans, their experiences, and how they grow. And qualitative research is a great way to investigate those things. Lastly, we will hop into teaching resources at Rutgers. That will be kind of our conclusion for this talk after we have discussed what is teaching? Why is it hard? How do we think about it? How do I learn about it in the data? What have we learned about it? And then naturally the conclusion is, well, what do we do about it? Teaching and pedagogical change are hard. Yeah, they're hard. Some people claim otherwise. Those people are wrong. Teaching is hard for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's physical spaces, right? The classroom you're in might not really be conducive to what you wish to do. Sometimes it's class sizes. If you have 25 students, group work, discussion, problem solving isn't so hard. If you have 900 students, it's a little harder, right? Time constraints. We are busy, busy people. Many of us are also researchers on top of teachers, or perhaps we are students on top of teachers. That means we don't necessarily have a lot of time to dedicate to teaching, and we can't afford to spend 40 hours a week, say, grading student problem sets. Lack of pedagogical training. This is not a problem for everyone, but for some of us, like me, oddly enough, we are not actually trained as teachers. We are trained as researchers, and that can make it really hard to engage with really up-to-date teaching practices, and it can make it really hard to understand why best practices are in fact best practices, especially when you went through school and everybody just kind of lectured at you, and you got through that. And then there are more, right? These are 4 of the biggest reasons that pedagogical change in teaching is hard, but promotion structures and expectations and whether or not you're interested in it can all play a role, right? In spite of the fact that it is hard, people do this. They seek to teach, and they seek to teach well. Why do they bother? Well, turns out having successful students and interacting with your students can just be deeply rewarding. It can be very enjoyable. People love their subject areas. I'm a physicist. I think physics is awesome. You may have noticed the Lorentz equations on my introduction slide. So I love teaching physics because it's fun, right? People believe that they should do a good job. For some of us, teaching is our job, and you might think you should do your job well. People want to do right by their students. Students are people too. We like our students. We'd like them to do well, right? And also teaching, some people just think teaching is fun. Not everyone agrees with me, but I think teaching is fun. And that is one of the reasons I want to teach well, right? And your motivations can change over time. And we see this all the time when I am talking with faculty or grad students or other people who are involved in instructing, why they want to teach and why they want to do it well, if they care at all. These things change over time as they experience new things. And we are going to discuss all of that at least a little bit in today's talk. And now, it is time for you to introduce yourselves to me a little bit. And the way we're going to do this is that you are going to follow that link and you are going to give me just a few words that come to mind about teaching here at Rutgers. If you are someone who teaches, you should give me a few words about what it is like to teach. And if you are someone who is a student but does not teach, you should give me a few words about how you think the teaching is here at Rutgers. We have a bunch of interesting ideas here, and I am noticing that we don't have much overlap. We have so many good ideas that we don't even need to write the same one twice. That's kind of awesome. A few things that I'm going to draw your attention to, before we move on, because they stick out to me. I'm noticing that people have said that teaching can be overwhelming and that it is intense and that it is mentally stimulating. I'm seeing words like passionate here. I'm seeing investment. That sticks out a lot. You'll learn more about this as we go on. The things I'm paying attention to in my research include structural elements of this institution that affect how you teach and how you try to teach, and also the motivations of instructors. And so when I see words like passionate, I think excellent. That sounds like someone who is likely to be motivated. They are probably excited about this. When I see things like intense, it could mean they're excited about it, or it could mean that it's an awful lot of work, right? Investment sounds like this is costly. Teaching is taking up a lot of my resources. I'm also seeing, exciting ideas about what it means to be a teacher, right? Teachers are guides, teachers are imparting knowledge, content experts. I'm seeing rewarding in there. That's a wonderful word to see. Okay, so now that we have thought about what is teaching like here at Rutgers, really briefly, we're going to get into theory. This is going to be the hardest part of the talk, by far. The theory is dense and the theory is complicated, and we're only going to scratch the surface. And in order to kind of get the theory down, we should first think about why we need it, right? Why the heck do I need theories to understand people teaching? Well, because we think that structure impacts how instructors decide what to do in their courses. And we think, as you kind of beautifully demonstrated in that Mentimeter word cloud, that instructors have their own motivations and that impacts their decision making, right? Teaching was rewarding. That's got nothing to do with institutional structure, right? That's all about you, the person. So we need theories to explain why this is true. Structuration theory is going to tell us how structure impacts the decisions humans make, and vice versa, it turns out. And instructors' motivation, right, is impacting what they do. And for that, we're going to turn to what we call expectancy value theory, which tells us about how you become motivated or unmotivated based on what you value and based on what you expect. Love it when the names are descriptive. And now, once again, it is time for you to tell me things. Oh, I didn't put everything you needed on this slide, but luckily we will be posting in chat. Oh, I did. Good. We'll be posting in chat the required links. We're one step too far, though. Before you go to the link that we will be posting in chat, you are actually going to take 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, you are going to write about a paragraph, maybe a little more, about an experience you have had that has impacted your teaching, impacted how you engage with teaching, impacted the choices you make about teaching, right? Take some time to write about that, because shortly afterwards, you will be sharing that with me. First, we're going to start into structuration theory. And once we've talked about this, we're going to go back to the Padlet. And you will see why shortly. What is structuration theory? I promised you that this theory connects structure to people's decisions. And the way it does this is like so. Our world, humans find ourselves in some context, and that context includes structures that are external to me, the human, right? This can include physical structures like classrooms, but it can also include programs, right? Or promotion structures or pay structures, right? Can include social structures, right? Hierarchies. I have a boss. I may also have subordinates. I may have students. These things influence our internal structures. Internal structures are structures that exist only within me, the human. Typically, they are my understanding of how the world works, right? They're the way I think about things, the way I understand things, and my expectations for what's going to happen based on what people do. These two structures Influence active agency. As a human, there will come a time in my life when I must make decisions. In that moment, I am exercising agency, right? I am deciding something, and those decisions are based upon my internal and external structures. What is the context I find myself in, the external structures? And how do I understand it? The internal structures will tell me what I choose to do. And then there will be outcomes. I will make a decision, and based on that decision, I will do something. Maybe other people will react. Maybe I will break something. Maybe I will change a course. Who knows? And those outcomes will go back and they will impact my context and also my understanding of my context, right? My beliefs about myself and the world around me. And this cycle of structuration is how structures impact decisions and decisions impact structure, right? Good. I have more slides about this, but I'm going to skip these because they're not that interesting. And they take up too much time. And instead, I'm going to turn back to the Padlet here. So now we have looked at structuration theory, and I've told you that structuration has a few parts, right? External structures, what is happening outside of me. Internal structures, what is happening inside of me, right? And then moments of active agency where I choose to do things. And then the outcomes of my decisions, right? The things I actually do, the people I influence, right? The consequences. The reason I have this theory is that I can look at experiences of instructors and assess how do these pieces influence what they're doing. Took online classes on how to teach online classes. The instructor was very bad, right? And you might think, okay, that's a little short. What does this have to do with your theories? But this is an external structure, folks. An online class is an external structure that I could use to support my teaching, right? And lo, this external structure was not very helpful. In fact, in some ways, it may have been a hindrance. At the very least, it was not much help. So this will impact what you then choose to do in your courses, right? If you go to this online class, it is useless. And all of the online techniques they try to teach you are either badly taught or not helpful. You probably won't implement any of that in your own class, right? That's important. Constantly updating my courses based on student feedback. And this is a nice little self-contained example of structuration theory, right? I have a structure here. I have a structure for feedback. These are student evaluations. They're a form of external structure. And when I do something in my course as an instructor, I make a decision, I exercise some agency to change something. That has impacts, outcomes on the students, for instance. Those students will then go to the survey, they will tell me things, and that information comes back to me, which is going to adjust the choices I make in the future, right? This is actually a nice little complete structuration cycle loop right there in and of itself, right? My choices will impact my students. My students will feed back to me through the structure of student evaluations. That will adjust how I think about things, my internal structures. And all of this will adjust the choices I make next. Nice. Very complete. Right? Professors acknowledging student anxiety. This is going to be awesome for expectancy value theory to look at this, where we talk about motivation. And also, notice that the professor here is attending to interpreting students' responses. It turns out internal structures include how we interpret people's responses to us and people's communication with us. So secretly hiding in here is a little bit about internal structures and how this professor's internal structures impact the decisions they make in their course. This professor has ideas about what their students think and what their students feel and is trying to respond accordingly. Possibly successfully, possibly not. Right? I taught a language course and it was discouraging when the students decided it was too hard. This is going to be great for expectancy value theory, which we will come back to shortly. So I'm going to leave that one for the moment. And that means it is time to return to the slides. Everybody's favorite slides. Expectancy value theory. I promised you that we had two theories. This is theory number 2. As its name suggests, it has two major components: expectancy and value. It turns out that your motivation is deeply tied to how strongly you expect success. If I am motivated to do something, I probably expect it to go well. And if I expect that something will go badly, I'm probably not very motivated to do it. The theoretical construct that ties to this is called self-efficacy. Sometimes people refer to self-concept or concept of task. All of these theoretical constructs are about how strongly I believe I can succeed at something, or how well I think I can do. Under value, no, really, these are the things that are important to me. We have attainment. Attainment is your sense of self. This one's very hard to explain and describe. It's the hardest of the values. But generally, attainment is related to your identity. I'm a physicist. And as a physicist, something that is close to me is understanding the Lorentz transforms. Why? Because that is something that physicists should understand. So I value this out of a sense of attainment, right? By understanding the physics, I come closer to being a physicist in my own estimation, and that makes it important to me, right? Interest, stuff that you like, that you find enjoyable, that you think is cool. This is very human, this value. I like this one, right? I like that. That is interest. Nothing more and nothing less. Utility. This value comes from sort of external things, right? Attainment and interest are very much internal to you, the human. But utility is more external stuff. What is useful to me, right? I really want to transform my course. I have 300 students, and group work is hard to organize when there's only me in the classroom. I am going to get some student LAs so that I have 10 other humans in the classroom who can circulate and facilitate group work. That's very useful to me. LAs have utility. And then there is cost. This one is typically negative value. If something is costly to me, I don't like it, right? And cost, especially in terms of teaching, often comes in the form of time. Teaching is hard, teaching is time-consuming. Changing how I teach is especially time-consuming. That is a cost to me, right? I only have so much time in the day. Good. Now that we've discussed expectancy value theory, what's happening in the Padlet in terms of expectancy value theory? I just promised you that we'd come back to it, right? So let's go back to it. Seeing everything okay? I think we are. Very good. I promised you we'd come back to Al's comment, so we're coming back to Al's comment. You taught this language course, and it was super discouraging when the students decided it was too hard, right? This is related to EVT. Now, this is hard to unpack because this is just one sentence, and we'd want to talk a little more about what is happening around this sentence. But a thing that Al probably values here is student satisfaction, right? You, as an instructor, you want your students to feel successful, and your students didn't feel successful, and that's discouraging. That hurts, right? That sucks. This tells us about your personal values, right? And this kind of valuing is attainment, usually. As an instructor, caring about your students, right? You care about your students because you're an instructor. This is what instructors do. It's the role of the instructor, right? Instructors care about their students. And when their students are upset about something, instructors are usually upset as well. This tells me something valuable because when I'm trying to help people teach or when I'm trying to support people in their teaching, if you are valuing the responses of your students, then that tells me that, we can leverage things like formative feedback as part of your course transformations really effectively. And for those of you who are not familiar, formative feedback is this idea that as we go through the course, students submit feedback to you at regular intervals, and you make tweaks as you go along to try and adjust to that feedback, right? Sort of very responsive. In the oral exams case, this one also connects to EVT. And again, more context would be better. But you can imagine that in this story, this professor is concerned about how their students are feeling. Again, that connects back to attainment. Instructors care about their students and their students' success. This is part of the role of an instructor. This can also be connected back to things like cost, it turns out, from a student perspective. Oral exams can be quite costly, or they can feel quite costly, right? It's very intimidating, especially if you struggle with anxiety. Sitting in an oral exam can cost you a lot of grades because it can be very difficult to perform well in that high pressure situation. We've had new comments come in since I was last here. What have we got here? An excellent experience around engagement on a subject that piqued my interest. There we go. We love interest, right? That was one of our values in expectancy value theory. Courses that acknowledge how personal experiences help explain certain decisions. Ah, what are we doing today? This is very meta. Good. And this is about politics. Fantastic. Structuration theory actually comes from sociology and has, in many of the studies that use structuration theory, there are actually studies about politics and the influence of particular political regimes on various national decisions. So, how fun. What a connection. Tremendous. So, a thing I want to notice here is that one of the best experiences you had here was one of the best experiences, perhaps in part, because it was related to something that really piqued your interest, right? And this is why expectancy value theory is one of the theories I use. Because when we're helping people develop their teaching, we want both students and instructors to have the best experiences they can, right? And understanding where your interests lie is key to making that happen, right? Ooh, the old bad at math. This is one of the most heartbreaking stories I can ever run into is teachers telling people that they're bad at math. That makes me very sad. I hate it when this happens. Ah, but the story gets better. Very nice. We bring it back around. And a thing that is happening here in Sleepy Bee's comment is self-efficacy. I mentioned expectancy, and the construct that was under expectancy was self-efficacy, your sense of ability to do something. When teachers tell you you can't, or in general, when people in a position of authority or experience tell you you can't, this has a negative impact on your self-efficacy, your sense that you're competent at something. And that can result, so what can happen here is you don't do so well in math in an early grade, someone tells you you're bad at it, and then you believe you're bad at it. So you actually become bad at it. Not because you can't do math, but because someone has convinced you that you can't do math, right? Luckily, we had a tutor here who had the opposite effect, right? They kind of turned things around for you and helped you find your math skills and gain a little confidence there. But this is really critical. This is why we pay attention to self-efficacy, because your sense of your own competence seriously impacts how you perform and how likely you are to try. Okay, I'm going to return to the slides. I have picked on the audience enough for the time being. Thank you so much for sharing, folks. This presentation gets much more exciting when the audience shares with me. All right, so we have reached data. And where time is ticking by, so we should keep moving. The type of data we have is interviews. We have a bunch of these. It turns out that our interviews are all about faculty's teaching experiences here at Rutgers and the kind of professional development that they have engaged with. We did most of this over Zoom, And you may have experienced this at Rutgers, but doing things in person is very difficult here. Um, and then what we do to analyze these interviews is we transcribe them, we write it all down, and then we conduct, in this case, we're conducting what we call a thematic analysis, which involves going through the interviews and doing sort of the thing we did in Padlet just now, but writ large, where we go through each interview and we look at all the things people are saying and we code them, we say, according to our theoretical constructs, right? Here occurring are external discussion of external structures. Here occurring is discussion of internal structures. Here people are talking about the costs associated with this transformation. And as we do that, we then go ahead, once we've coded everything, and we find the themes that run through our data, broad themes like, oh my God, having a class of 900 students is difficult when you're only one instructor. It would be easier if I had more humans, right? And we cluster things according to theme, and then we go and look and see what theoretical constructs are tied with what themes. We haven't quite gotten that to the last part yet. We're partway through the analysis. And because we're only partway through, I'm going to introduce you to what we're doing right now. This is a quote from Dr. Burdock, one of our humans in our data set. No, that's not their real name. And no, I will not use their real name. Dr. Burdock here is talking about transformations that they are making in their 1,000 student course. It's a big course. And understandably, oh, we'll get there in a moment. I'm ahead of myself. And why are they doing this? It turns out they're doing this because when they started college, they really wanted support. They were part of an underserved minority. So, you know, in physics, the obvious example would be women in physics, would be underserved minorities, right? We may also think of racial minorities in college or ethnic minorities, people who have access needs, right? Whichever the case, Dr. Burdock identifies with these minority students and wants to give them all the support they need to thrive, right? That is Dr. Burdock's main motivation here. And you'll notice that we've connected this to attainment, right? Sense of self. This idea that I'm part of this minority. I identify with these students is what is important here. And then Dr. Burdock goes on to talk about how the change attempts went. So the thing that Dr. Burdock tried to do was kind of make a more active learning centric course, including like group work during class time, right? Group problem solving and things like that. The problems that occurred here were cost at the end of the day, and we'll see that in a moment. Dr. Burdock complains about not having enough staff. It turns out that Dr. Burdock, in order to have enough people to engage with 1,000 students, has a ton of tutors and LAs. And these tutors and LAs help with grading and they help with in-class coursework, but there's like 100 of them. And managing all of these LAs is really hard. And Dr. Burdock was struggling with this, so they tried to implement this, head TA who could help them with the management. It wasn't enough. The costs are still too high. It's still too much of a burden. And so Dr. Burdock has come to this conclusion, right? I can't do this by myself. It turns out Dr. Burdock actually goes on to tell us that they are dropping this whole business. They will be stopping this attempt to make changes in the course and they will be reverting back to kind of a more traditional course. It's just too much work. Which is very sad. This is very heartbreaking news. But this is an example of how external structures can sometimes stop us from making particular decisions, right? Agency is our ability to make choices and feel like we have the power to do it. And here, Dr. Burdock's agency is constrained, right? Their external structures are stopping them from doing this thing that they want to do. Unfortunate. You'll notice that I've color-coded bits of text and the theory components that kind of go with it. I'll also talk about Dr. Polymonium here, who discovered LAs. This is super exciting. Anytime someone discovers LAs, it's super exciting. So LAs are the external structure that is happening here, or perhaps the LA program is the external structure that they have discovered. And the other thing that is marked as external structures in this paragraph is the actual classroom itself, right? Where what Dr. Polymonium is saying is, I do a lot of active learning in my classes, and that's fine in small classes when it's, just me and 25 students, but it's less fine in big classes when it's just me and 100 students, say, and I can't really get around to all the groups in time. The classrooms are okay for this, but there aren't enough humans, right? And so the utility here, which we pulled out from expectancy value theory, is that having other people having these LAs would be useful to me, right? And that is utility. What Dr. Polymonium is valuing here is the utility of having more people in the classroom to help with the teaching. And so we can sense that Dr. Polymonium is feeling pretty motivated here about these changes. I mean, Dr. Polymonium is actually interested in making these changes. Dr. Polymonium feels that they're going pretty well, and Dr. Polymonium has identified a program here that can help them make it even better. So that's very promising. And Dr. Polymonium goes on to make a comment here where we actually can see their agency here for once, which is kind of rare in interviews, because in structuration theory in particular, agency is really the moment of decision making, which is a little different from a lot of agency theories. So when I say that this is coded as agency, what I mean is, in this moment, Dr. Polymonium is describing the choice they made and why they made it. And the choice they made was, I'm not going to have learning assistants in my classroom yet. And the reason is, I don't feel prepared yet. I'm not sure what I want them to do. But as soon as I know what I want them to do, I'm going to submit that application for LAs. Right? Which is super cool. Dr. Burdock gave up because things were too hard, but here it looks like Dr. Polymonium is feeling encouraged, and that's exciting, right? And I want to wrap this back to our mission. We are trying to support people in their teaching changes, right? So understanding what are the things that are too hard and make you quit, and understanding what are the things that are good and help you persist is important to me. Because if I'm going to help you support you in your teaching, I need to know, right? What would help you persist in teaching and making changes to your teaching? And we have reached teaching resources because now we have gone through theory and we have gone through data and you're all half asleep. And now what I'm going to do is tell you, hey, if you have ever had these experiences and you've just told me that you have in fact had both positive and negative experiences with teaching, well, then you should see what kind of resources we have at Rutgers to make your teaching or perhaps learning experiences better. And yes, I will talk about both. So if you're a student, don't tune out. There will be useful news for you here. Here is an overview, ambitious of me to have an overview slide for this part of the talk. These are some of the people we're going to talk about, and I'm just going to get into talking about them. The Institute for Teaching, Innovation, and Inclusive Pedagogy, that name that I could not get right at the start of my talk, no matter how hard I tried. TIP. These are the first people you should look to, especially if you're an instructor here. They run courses, they run workshops, they also have resources like instructional designers. So if you need one-on-one consulting about what you're doing in your course, you want some actual face-to-face help, they have that for you, right? They have all kinds of resources for anyone trying to change up their teaching, anyone trying to learn new tricks. You should meet TIP. They are rapidly becoming the hub of teaching support here at Rutgers campus. Tracy Addy, who I mentioned at the start of the talk, is the director for TIP, and bless Tracy for all the hard work she is doing. TIP is a new office, and Tracy is doing the hard work of making that office work. So if you ever see Tracy, please say thank you to Tracy for me, and for all of us. The active learning community. I mentioned a lot of active learning throughout this talk. If you do any kind of active learning, or if you're thinking of doing active learning, you should meet the active learning community. They have a bunch of resources. They have a bunch of experienced people who can help you figure out how to make it work. They also know where the active learning classrooms are on Rutgers campus. And yes, we do have active learning classrooms. Well worth investigating. The Learning Center. Students, I told you there was news for you here. Here it is. If you haven't heard about it already, the Learning Center is primarily about supporting the student learning experience here at Rutgers, and they are the home of the LA program. So instructors, if you are thinking about the student experience in your course, and you want to integrate students more completely as part of the learning process in your course, you should look at the Learning Center. They can help you with LAs. You can also set up tutoring through the Learning Center and student mentoring through the Learning Center. These are great things for your course. It really helps foster a sense of student community when students work together and when students support each other. So this is an awesome program. The Office of University Online Education Services. These are the people who help us with all the button pushing and how we integrate it into our teaching. That is overly simplistic. If you want to use videos in your teaching, if you are teaching online, if you are teaching in person, but maybe you want to record your lectures and share them online, right? Or any number of other using online and technology-based tools in your classroom, reach out to these people. They are there to help you with things like, how do I use polls, and how do I use lecture videos, and how do I get my Zoom links working, and how do I use the technology in this room, such as the screens and the mics? Great people. Otter, the Office for Teaching Evaluations and Assessment Research. If you make a change in your course, you might want to know how it went, right? How do I assess my teaching, and how do I know what is working and what isn't? These are your people. If you have questions about what is working and what isn't, you should visit Otter. They're good folks. They also have some handy workshops for professional development. They kind of talk about how you can take all of your evaluations, right, and observations that you may have experienced and work that into your teaching portfolio, which is a great professional document. So reach out to Otter. For grad student TAs, the TA project, our grad students teach, and if you want to know more about how to teach as a grad student, the TA project is an awesome place to go. They're through the graduate school and they offer all kinds of workshops and certificate programs that are beneficial to you now and also beneficial to you when you start applying for jobs. And then lastly, Triad. Triad is doing something a little different here. They're kind of the black sheep of all these groups. They're actually focused on the education research side of things. So if you have done sort of teaching growth and development and you've started doing some of these transformations in your courses, and you think, man, I'm really curious about how all of this works. No, really. There are other people just like you who love to research why teaching and education works, and they are here. You should talk to them. Even if you're not sure if that's something you want to do, pop by the Triad Red page and sniff around a little. You might be amazed how interesting education research can get. And I've hit the summary slide. That is the sign that I am done. It's about time. Thank you for listening, folks. I will stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Haas. This was wonderful. I think we have some time for questions. If anyone would like to ask them, I think you feel free to unmute.
Can I jump in? I always have questions. Dr. Haas, I was just curious, for the resources that you shared at the end, is this something that came about as you were conducting your research here at Rutgers, or was this also information that you received as an international postdoc when you arrived at Rutgers?
The answer is sort of a little of column A and a little of column B. Many of these resources are things that I learned about through doing research here, although sometimes that was through discussions with other research team members. I mean, the answer to that question is yes and, right? Some of these things were advertised to me through the Office of Postdoctoral Advancement. Some of them came to me through other newsletters. Many of them came to me through discussions about what interviewees in our our research program are doing. Sorry, a little slow. Yes. I'm sharing them here because it turns out we are slowly getting better at having a central page that lists all of these things, but most people are still not aware of them. So we are sharing them here. If you are looking for a central hub of where can I find everything you want to know about teaching resources, TIP is probably the place to go. They have most of this listed on their website.
I know the Teaching Excellence Network touches on a variety of different fields and schools within Rutgers. Have you noticed any trends that might be like any maybe structural barriers that tend to be tied to any particular field, or a lot of the barriers are kind of similar across the different fields of study?
That's a cool question. There are several. Yes, the short answer is yes. There are some kinds of barriers that are notable within some fields, more notable within some fields than others. I won't claim that I have ever seen a truly field-specific barrier in the sense that, only physics has this barrier and no one else. No, never seen that. Some fields do have much stronger cultural barriers to teaching than other fields, and that is the most common one to see that is field-specific or school-specific, whether it is here at Rutgers or elsewhere. In terms of Rutgers-specific barriers, no, they're pretty field agnostic, right? Things like promotion structures, what's available on campus for resources, classrooms, right? Getting around campus is a commonly cited barrier here on Rutgers by everybody. It's just a pain to get to where I need to be, and that can have a serious impact on my teaching, both because I have trouble getting there, but also because my students have trouble getting there. So this is a subtle barrier that a lot of people express, is that I want to do these active learning things in my classroom, but students don't show up reliably, and when they do show up, they show up 20 minutes late, which makes it very hard to say set up student groups for group work, right? Yeah, commonly cited barrier at Rutgers that everybody has. More field-specific barriers would include things like, and this one I'm pulling from computer science. Actually, this example is not from someone at Rutgers, but it is a barrier in computer science as a discipline everywhere. Is that computer science and a number of STEM disciplines have a sort of culture of toughness, resiliency, and there is a sense, there is a barrier in some fields to, for instance, equity and diversity work and making classrooms more accessible. And one of the arguments that comes up, weirdly, is a cultural argument that, well, if we make the classroom more accessible, if we try to make it easier on students, they won't be tough enough to make it in our field. By having a hard time in school, they toughen up, and that's important. So there are some interesting cultural barriers that are field specific. But those tend not to be Rutgers specific. Those tend to be discipline specific.
Dr. Haas, this sounds like a really, really great topic. And I was just wondering if, how widely you're able to share this or train other people who are teaching to help them be better teachers, manage their classrooms better, or courses better.
Well, my personal reach is a little short. As a research postdoc, I spend little time in the actual facilitation role, but how much reach do the programs at Rutgers have? It's growing. And the answer is that's actually why this research program came about. We want to have more reach. It is hard to reach people at Rutgers. The institutions are very siloed, and sometimes it's hard to find things. So the 10 program, I mentioned our leadership and coordinating councils way back at the start of the talk. Those were designed to bring together people from across various schools, various departments, various campuses to talk about how do we network our resources better and how do we get them out to people better. Ultimately, TIP emerged in parallel to our work, and TIP is becoming the central hub for most teaching resources. And as TIP is becoming that central hub, Tracy, Addy, and all of the awesome people in the TIP office are doing the work of extending their reach Currently, that reach is in principle, across all of Rutgers. In practice, we're still trying to get people to know about all of these resources.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. That was very interesting. But since I have this opportunity, maybe two questions. Feel free to address just one of them. One is, I wonder who were those 21 faculty members that you interviewed, meaning that, representation-wise. And the second question is, you started your presentation with a, I'm a Canadian, so I guess proud Canadian. As you work on this here at Rutgers, have you tried to compare, what instructors face here in the US and with faculty in Canada? And, are there any differences, or, we face similar, challenges, opportunities, concerns, and so on? Thank you.
Oh, fun questions. Data question first is an easy one to answer. So we have 21 faculty, as you noted, or 21 interviews, 21 unique faculty members. I had to think about that for a moment. I've worked on projects where we had multiple interviews with the same person, but that is not this project. Our faculty are mostly from the School of Arts and Sciences with the 10 program, and that is really a feature of who was responsible for creating the 10 program. The 10 grant PIs are in chemistry, physics, engineering, and the Bush Campus Learning Center. So many of the people we bump into are SAS faculty, but not all the people. Thank you, Mary. Mary's my PI, so she has all these details. Yeah. The second question, have I worked with Canadians on what Canadian faculty are doing? God, I would love to do that, but no, I have not. It turns out that higher ed, so research on what faculty do, is a thriving thing in the United States of America. It does exist in Canada, but Canada is much smaller than the US population-wise, and so our higher ed crew is also much smaller. I have not had the opportunity to work with them.
Thank you.
Anecdotally, because I know Canadian faculty, obviously, for many reasons, I can say that they face many similar challenges, although not the current political challenges for the most part.
This is really interesting work, and I think it's going to have long-lasting implications.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. This was lots of fun.
Thank you to everyone who attended. We hope you enjoyed.